Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Little Rollers Live. We are now here after the rolls, talking a little bit about this last session we had, deconstructing it a fair bit. And Chris, why don't you take it away with what you have planned for tonight?
Cool. The first thing we should do is we should give XP for the session, which involves me to not be an idiot and close my notes down like I normally do after a session. But for what it's worth, you will receive 750 for the roleplay, and then I'm giving you guys a bonus 300 XP for basically giving up. So you'll receive 1,050 total.
Okay. So we should be at 69,875.
I'll let you know as soon as I open my notes.
That's about
It's
half.
correct. Calculators are handy.
Pretty much.
Oh.
All right, Chris, so you want to break down for us how you think the last session went? And whatever topic you had planned for us?
Yeah, so first thing I'm going to do is we'll talk a little bit about what happened in some of the thought process. Our best chapter, I think, of the last story arc had to do with we were exploring cultures and putting the party in an uncomfortable situation, which I tried to do. I admit I borrowed this amusement war scene from a book I read because I thought it would be fitting for what I envisioned for the culture, and I think it would really challenge the party, especially knowing that Astor was not going to be here, and the character I assigned for Danny Garcia, along with just the general moral standpoint and that sort of thing. So my first question is how did you guys handle both maybe the necromancy aspect of the culture and then this amusement war?
I just felt, as Zarrius would, that it was definitely on the darker side. Something like Asmodeus would definitely do. So I might be maybe ever so slightly more accustomed than my companions, but it still was kind of dark and not the most pleasant, as I stated in the actual game.
Yeah, and you know, I kind of I admit I didn't get a chance to really prep for the session until today, so today's been a scramble. And I remember texting Danny Allinson, like, you know, this particular session is going to be very gruesome from a standpoint, and there's going to be these things, and you know, we live in kind of a fragile society almost. And just talking to him about our approach to it, but I don't want to shy away from hard topics generally, but this one kind of pushed my limits of my comfortable state. Any thoughts on that, Danny Allinson?
Oh, no, I mean, I think it's worth talking about, especially when we are put into a position as characters, put into a position that we're not comfortable with in a foreign culture. I think that's the best time to do it. And, you know, even with the different nations that are in the main continent that we've been at this entire campaign, even though there's differences in cultures, there are still there's almost like a standard amongst all of them about what is taboo and what isn't. And to come to a different culture now and experience, you know, a whole different set of moral grounds or moral basis, I think that's an interesting thing to experience, not only experience those changes, but also to experience a change in itself.
Yeah, that's a very good point, and one I'm trying to touch on is it's really hard. This arc is me trying to do more morally challenging things, more character challenging things, because I want you to grow as characters, because that's kind of the point to me. Yeah. Any other thoughts on that?
On our growth as characters, or on how our characters reacted to some of these changes?
How characters and players reacted to this particular culture.
Well, if I may chime in, going off of the comment that you made earlier about how we live in a society where these kinds of topics are usually shied away from, the way I see it is because they're shied away from is why we should actually explore them. Not to use it, but kind of to have a just expand your viewpoint a bit, if that makes any sense. Because if there's one thing that's best for anybody, player, character, whatever you will, is experiencing or just observing as many different things to expand your own I don't know how to say it, your own experiences. That will kind of let you grow as a person. Of course, let your character grow as a person. So even though it's something that makes you uncomfortable, that's kind of what lets you push the envelope more, kind of, make it even bigger as time goes by. So I personally appreciate being able to experience this different type of viewpoint and kind of see what my take on it is, because if I hadn't done this session, if I hadn't thought about this kind of session now, I probably never would have. So I personally like being able to experience that.
Yeah, it's through that challenge that we understand our own perspective and either strengthen it or find a new perspective that we find we more closely resemble.
And from a standpoint, storytelling and the art of storytelling, and what I like about it as a writer, musician, XYZ, is being able to approach topics I couldn't be able to approach. When I make a D&D character, I always have a theme that I want to approach, fate, predestination, free will, that sort of thing. And it's interesting to explore those topics.
Yeah, I also think this helps us expand our characters a little bit more, pushes us in new directions to see what would they do in this situation. I find for me, playing Narroth, it's interesting because I had to think about, would Narroth be disgusted by this? And if so, why? And so the reasons, the what he finds present or lacking in this culture that he agrees or disagrees with speaks very much to what he holds as a character. So the values that you might not think of when you're writing a background or when you're just exploring this in the abstract are quite different from when you're actually plunged into the middle of a new situation.
Yeah, and Danny Allinson may be able to relate to me a little bit. Danny and I have both been out of the country. I went to Germany. Danny did a tour of the UK and France, I believe.
Yep.
And there's a certain amount of culture shock, even though they're technically Western cultures. Like, America is definitely more violent, and Germany, at least, was more sexually orientated, I would say. And me used to seeing violent movies or stuff like that, and not used to seeing nudity on the streets or that sort of thing. I mean, it's the same sort of approach for us as we go into places. And I've been to India, and India is very, very different than how we view things. Like our bus stopped for like 10 minutes because cows were crossing and we were very confused. But yeah, I think it brings up a good point that our characters can approach culturally, and it's meant to make you think. This storytelling D&D is fun. We go into battle, we kill things, but it's also meant for us to go, wait, so what is the topic of redemption per se? Any concluding thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think just as playing a character who like almost prides themselves on coming into new cultures and meeting new people and learning new things. It was interesting for me specifically to now have to face this part of it of, you know, how does Bryn react when the culture isn't what she expects or not something she agrees with at all, something she's disgusted by. So I thought it was good. It's a good place to put our characters, to test them and flex them a little bit and see what points they're strong at and what points they might be weak at. And I'm sure we'll see that in the weeks to come, as well as we learn more about this culture and deal more with the people that are part of this town.
Cool. The second point I wanted to talk to Danny Garcia about Phillip, and I wrote this character. I wrote the stats for it and gave him. I think it's a little difficult character to play. It's a character that from my character vault of things I thought about playing. I don't think this character would ever see the light of day, but you know it did by giving it to you. What did you think about the challenge of playing Phillip, and how did everyone react to the character?
Well, my personal take on Phillip is, for one, he is much more courteous than I will ever be in real life, so that was the hard part. However, I mean, there were a couple of things about him that resonated with me to a certain extent, but the most difficult part, I suppose, was the fact that he is supposed to be someone who tries to oppose violence or anything that's overly negative while trying to look for the best in everything. This is definitely a culture that will be very difficult for Phillip to kind of find that silver lining. Honestly, I don't know, it's just difficult. I'm enjoying it just because I'm having to approach a completely different mindset from what I'm used to, in the form of Astor being the very outgoing guy, just really being out there, whereas Phillip is just more spiritual, I suppose I would say. I don't know, it's just a completely different mindset for me, so I'm learning. I'm trying.
Yeah, and yeah, Phillip was designed as what I think me as a person would want to be. I want to be the person who can find beauty in every little thing, and that's kind of how I designed Phillip. But that's hard and that's challenging. So it's going to be an interesting take as we deal with as I'm sure you guys can tell, a very corrupt society where the person who runs the casino is sitting at the same level as the king.
Yeah, it's definitely different. We'll see what happens.
Any thoughts on Phillip?
I already said my piece.
I thought it was interesting that just in terms of an orc having, an orc having some sort of religious background other than kind of something a little bit more barbaric. And that was kind of just like, it was fresh in a certain way. Just to have that sort of aspect that a orc would look for the nice things in the world rather than try and obliterate a lot of things. and to be able to communicate and discuss that with Danny was very interesting.
Yeah, it's I think my perspective changed on D&D when you think about, like, well, if you look in a culture of, let's say, elves, even elves need clerics, even elves have sorcerers, elves have, strength-based fighters, and you kind of go for a second that even though their stats that D&D gives them aren't very good for that, they still exist, and we can tell very interesting stories through that. So we have an orc cleric, so there you go. Cool. My final point I want to talk to, which is going to probably take the meat of this, is I want to talk about Zarrius quite in-depthly, actually. I gave Zarrius basically the task of running the party in the absence of Astor and, even thinking further back, the other leaders of the party, Kai when he was here, and Ryan, who were de facto leaders. And I thought you did really well today, Seitz, as far as that is concerned. You said some really good things. You really pushed a couple story points I was surprised to approach so early. And you were humble when it came to that final battle. So let's talk about Zarrius, his character creation a little bit, some of the thought process going towards it, and then we can talk about how that led to some of the decisions today. So tell me about Zarrius.
Yeah, so Zarrius, Chris approached me when I was not in the campaign. They started, I don't know, what was it, like 4 months before I joined the actual campaign. They had already been playing for like 4 months or something like
4
that.
to 6, somewhere in there. Yeah.
Yeah. So they had been playing already, and Chris approached me and was like, "Hey, I'm looking for another character to join our campaign," and Chris challenged me to play something that I don't normally do. And he kind of hinted at he wanted some sort of like crowd controlling character person who can just move around all over the place and control everything that's going on, which is something that I don't normally play. Like Chris said, I think last session, I was used to playing a wheelin' dealin' barbarian, just slashing, raging all the time and smashing everything. So this was a challenge for me to wrap my head around. And so deciding on Zarrius being a monk, as well as the religious aspect of a nature god, was kind of interesting for me, at least, to worship a god of nature and use nature as kind of like a beauty aspect, as would Phillip, just in beauty in general. But my backstory essentially is I was born to a father and mother, and the father had made a pact with the devil, Asmodeus, and had sold my mother into slavery, essentially, for Asmodeus. So that was kind of his offering to Asmodeus. And I grew up, as some of you probably don't know this, but I'm a gnome tiefling. So that's why I'm so small. And so I grew up with a church of Obad-Hai, of all gnomes. They were all gnomes, and I grew up worshiping Obad-Hai and practicing meditation and all that sort of stuff, and then started wandering around a little bit, but still worshiping Obad-Hai and trying to. I think the way we said that I was going to join the party was I was just kind of wandering, taking care of meditations and all that sort of stuff. And I was up in the Feywild while this all happened, and proceeded to be able to transport back and forth from the Feywild and all that sort of stuff, and ended up joining up with Astor, and that's how I kind of joined into the party. In terms of the character creation, Chris and I took probably about 2 hours discussing the more detailed aspects of the character, just talking back and forth about what I would want the character to be. And I feel as the story has gone along, I've been able to hone in on that just a little bit more and focus in on who Zarrius is like actually. And I wouldn't say the backstory has changed at all, but I've been able to get a better grasp of who he really is.
Yeah, cool. I remember reading Seitz's very first backstory, and it was in like a chicken scratch. What is the font called?
It was just like Chick-fil-A text, and that
Okay.
was just on purpose to piss Chris off.
And I think your first character was a fighter, I believe. Who was
I think so.
A soldier or something like that.
Uh-huh.
Your second character was a barbarian who used to be a soldier. And I think your third character was a barbarian orc thing that carried like decapitated heads on his belt or something like that.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
each one gave me like a +2 to intimidation rolls, and I had a brutal intimidation roll.
Or something like that. And, you know, I, as a DM, was like, I don't want that. I don't care for that.
Well, you did forget that we did play a champions round where you DM'd Chris, and I played a healer, kind of a damaging healer, but that was kind of out there.
Yeah, the Church of War. I remember that.
Uh-huh.
Where Vernon was playing his overweight halfling travel mage. I remember that. That was a good bit. Yeah, so I think I want to get some other people's opinions on Zarrius real quick about how they think they've seen Seitz grow as a player tremendously. And, you know, Seitz was not the player he is today when he first started my campaign. I think Zarrius or Seitz was very quiet and never really gave much of an opinion. I don't know if that's accurate, but any thoughts on that?
I guess I'll go ahead and talk as somebody who so for some backstory about the campaign itself. This Bryn Wanders is my third character now. The past two have died, and the past two were I guess you would you would describe them as kind of the leaders of the group in some way or another. But already I can see with how the difference between their leadership styles, which was very like gruff, in your face, you're doing what I'm telling you to do, in different ways, but they were both like that, both Ryan and Kai. But to see, you know, we had this scene tonight where Zarrius came up to Bryn and was just like, and even came up to Narroth at another point in time and said, I need your help. Like, I need your opinions. I need to know what you're thinking. And I think that comes from a place of where Zarrius was kind of unregarded in some ways by the previous leaders of the group, and now that he's put in the same position, he doesn't want that to be the case while he's in charge. And it's really cool to see that change in this leadership style, even if at the end he still kind of took a lesson out of Kai and Ryan's book by punching Phillip.
Yeah, Phillip's head probably didn't move at all.
Yeah,
probably, but kind of got the message across.
Yeah, so it's cool. It's very cool to see.
He was contemplating clicking on the forehead, but held back.
Danny was contemplating. Phillip wasn't.
Yes, that.
Yes.
Any other thoughts on Zarrius?
Well, I agree with with all of what Danny said, honestly. But it has been pretty interesting to see Zarrius' character being fleshed out more. Um, and I particularly feel like I can relate quite a bit because as some of you may remember, as I said last session, that Astor also was one of my first really serious characters. So kind of seeing him and like growing up with him as a player and character as well was rather fun. I mean, there are a couple of times Astor kind of tried to, you know, bring Zarrius along because he wanted him to be there and that kind of thing. But I've enjoyed seeing Zarrius do what Zarrius had been doing. It's been fascinating because his race is usually not really looked upon favorably, but at least with this group, his actions have definitely shown that he's not your typical tiefling.
Any other thoughts? Okay. So I think we talked about this last week, but I gave each of my characters themes. I gave each of my player characters themes, and for Zarrius, we talked about giving him this moral gray area of doing the wrong thing for the right reason. I think is specifically the terminology we used, and we saw that in last week's episode where he made the pact with Asmodeus again. And you know, when I put this arc in front of him, this particular chapter, there's a lot of agreeing with the wrong thing, the wrong force, to hopefully try to get a positive result. Have you thought about that at all, Seitz, as we were playing today?
Today, I maybe just thinking about it now, but not necessarily while I was specifically playing the character.
Sure.
But just looking back at today in terms of doing the right thing for the wrong, or sorry, doing the wrong thing for the right reason. I get those swapped. Even like just this last little encounter with that Davik messenger, I feel like I needed to get the point across to Phillip, and I felt like the only way to do that was to do something physically to him, and that's the only thing I could possibly think of that would kind of get maybe his attention. And it was hopefully to do this peacefully.
I tried not to laugh, man. That was awesome.
I know. But like even just that little instance that I thought was doing the wrong thing for the right reason. But in terms of just my overall character for that specific theme, I serve two different gods, and I want to favor Obad-Hai much more heavily over Asmodeus. I do not particularly want to deal with Asmodeus, anything like that, like as little as possible. Do not want to have to worry about him. But in order for me to get my mother back, I must do this, and I really want my mother to be back with me. That's my ultimate like character goal, is to have her back. And so I will do at whatever it costs to get her back, and thus having to make another deal with Asmodeus is what I have to do. Then I'll do it. And I'm doing it for my mom, the one I've never met. So it was also a challenge for like Chris throwing that out as a theme for me was kind of just like, oh yeah, that's definitely how my character would roll in terms of doing the wrong things for the right reason. That's how my character's kind of gone most of the time. I feel like I kind of just go with the flow of the party almost when it comes to combat, and I'm there for support, but I don't try and like kill. That's not me. I don't kill enemies. I leave that to everyone else. I think I've maybe killed one person, and I think I made it known that I didn't like doing that when after I did that, and I was just like, oh shoot.
I was kind of anticipating combat to happen. What is going to happen tonight? It would have happened at the beginning of next session, but I have to admit, for initiative, for my rogue characters that were hiding in the shadows, both of them rolled nat 20s. Jedward's can verify this, as I was rolling while he was on roll 20 as well. And then I rolled sneak rolls for them. One of them rolled a nat 20, the other one rolled a 25. And so, for what it's worth, these were characters that had sneak attack. They had the assassinate perk, so they get the critical hit if your character is surprised. It would have been good for me.
For you. Well, it's a good thing Zarrius led us the right way then.
I mean, it's not unbeatable for sure, but I guess my last question to Seitz is have you grown any as a person, thinking about some of the themes that your character goes through? I know that when I play a character, at least when I play a serious character, not like Carl from HR, I tend to grow up as a person ever so slightly. I think of themes like family or my own personal religious standpoints as I play characters with those themes. Anything like that?
Yeah, I would say definitely. Just the whole aspect of this leadership section already has kind of just like challenged me almost to speak up a little bit more in my own personal life, because me personally, I'm more of an observer. I sit back and I observe what's going on, and I take in what everyone's saying and kind of just form an opinion based on what everyone's saying in my personal background. And so this so far has already like challenged me. Even these just 2 sessions that we've done live have kind of challenged me to maybe speak up just a tad more in my personal life. But overall, I feel like this character has forced me more to think about what my role is kind of in society almost, which kind of sounds weird. But just the whole idea of be sticking with a group of people and being able to work with them and go throughout different endeavors sort of thing, and just being with a group of people for quite some time is something that I'm not used to really. So it's kind of weird just to be with these guys every week and kind of fun at the same time. A lot of fun at the same time.
Most of the time.
It's fun.
Most of the time.
Cool. I think that concludes my line of questioning. Any final thoughts from anyone?
I think we had some really good character moments tonight. For all of us, made us all think a little bit more about our characters and how they would react to some situations, and even some Easter eggs for us. So that was all fun.
Hi, you bet.
The thing is Yvette, I don't know if Ryan actually ever had a kid, or if Ryan would even know that. So I am half deciding to figure out if Yvette is lying about it yet, or if she is actually related.
Well, I guess we'll find out then. Certainly not something I was expecting.
I don't think any of us were.
I wasn't planning to reveal that this session, but apparently
Hey, I got it out.
Yeah. Cool. next week we will meet Davik and probably the king eventually.
Sweet. Well, thank you everybody for joining us. We're going to go ahead and sign off for the night. Again, you can find us here Monday nights at 9 p.m. Pacific as we roll low live, I guess. You can also find us on YouTube. Just look for Pwrlvl Podcasts. That's PWRLVL Podcasts. Thanks so much for joining us, and have a great night.